This story contains themes of infidelity that some viewers may find offensive. If you are sensitive to such content, please scroll away. If you enjoy this content, please like, subscribe, and share. It really helps the channel, and it hurts when you don't. Thank you for your support. Hi, my name is Amy. Let me begin by saying, it's strange how something so seemingly insignificant can unravel your entire world. I remember it vividly. It was a Saturday afternoon, one of those rare, sunny days when everyone decided to have a barbecue. Harry, my husband, had invited George, his best friend since childhood, over. George, always the life of the party, arrived with a cooler full of drinks and a booming laugh that filled our backyard. Harry and George were inseparable. They'd known each other since they were kids, and their bond was something I'd always admired. They were like brothers. George, though, was different from Harry in so many ways. He was more outgoing, more charismatic. He had this presence. And, well, he was black. That was something new to me. I'd always considered myself open-minded, but there was something about George's confidence, his physicality, that was intriguing. I remember the first time I saw him without a shirt, working up a sweat by the grill. There was a raw, undeniable power to him. I couldn't help but notice. I'd even find myself peeking to see the outline of his stick when he was in his basketball shorts. It was a fleeting, forbidden thought, but it was there. Harry, bless his heart, was oblivious. He was content, happy in his little world, focused on the grill and the game on the outdoor TV. We'd been married for 8 years, and our relationship had settled into a comfortable routine. Too comfortable, perhaps. The spark, the excitement, had faded, replaced by the mundane rhythm of daily life. George, on the other hand, was like a breath of fresh air. He paid attention to me, really listened when I spoke. He'd compliment my cooking, my dress, my hair, little things that Harry seemed to overlook. He'd make me laugh, tell me stories, and make me feel seen. It was a stark contrast to the way Harry seemed to take me for granted. It started subtly, a shared laugh, a lingering glance, a touch that felt a little too warm. I'd find myself drawn to him, seeking out his company, anticipating his arrival. I'd catch him looking at me, a flicker of something in his eyes that made my heart race. It was a strange, unsettling feeling, a mix of excitement and guilt. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was playing with fire. But the pull was undeniable. It was like a drug, a forbidden pleasure that I couldn't resist. I'd find myself making excuses to be near him, to talk to him, to touch him. A casual brush of his arm, a lingering hand on his shoulder, each interaction sending a jolt of electricity through me. My mind started to play tricks on me, justifying my feelings, minimizing the importance of my marriage vows. I'd tell myself that Harry was distant, that he didn't appreciate me anymore. I'd focus on the perceived flaws in our relationship, the lack of excitement, the feeling of being taken for granted. I'd compare Harry to George, highlighting the differences that made George seem so appealing. Harry's always working, I'd think. He never has time for me. Or, George actually listens to me. He understands me in a way Harry doesn't. I started to believe that I was justified in seeking connection elsewhere. That I deserved to feel desired, to feel alive. I'd tell myself that I wasn't truly happy, that I was trapped in a loveless relationship. It was a convenient narrative, a way to absolve myself of guilt. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was betraying the man I loved, the man who had given me his heart. The guilt was a constant ache, a gnawing reminder of the damage I was inflicting. I'd see the trust in Harry's eyes, the unwavering belief in our bond, and it felt like a knife twisting in my heart. Each stolen moment, each whispered conversation chipped away at my soul. The secrecy, the lies, the constant fear of discovery, it consumed me. I'd find myself lying to Harry, making excuses to go out, to be alone. I'd delete text messages, clear my browser history, constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid of being caught. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, but I couldn't stop. I was caught in a dangerous game, a web of deceit that was slowly unraveling. The thrill of the forbidden was intoxicating, but the consequences were inevitable. I was playing with fire, and I knew I was going to get burned. The question was, how badly? And how many others would I take down with me? The more time I spent with George, the more I craved his attention, his touch. It was like an addiction, a craving that grew stronger with each passing day. I found myself thinking about him constantly, fantasizing about him, replaying our interactions in my mind. I started to dress differently, to wear makeup more often, to pay more attention to my appearance. I wanted to look good for George, to catch his eye, to make him want me. It was a desperate attempt to recapture the feeling of being desired, to feel like a woman again. I was losing myself in the process, becoming someone I didn't recognize. The woman I saw in the mirror was a stranger, a shadow of my former self. I was consumed by guilt, by desire, by fear. I was trapped in a cycle of self-destruction, and I didn't know how to escape. The more I rationalized, the more I justified, the deeper I sank into the abyss of infidelity. I was on a slippery slope, and I was hurtling towards the edge, oblivious to the impending crash. The heat of the summer intensified, mirroring the growing heat between George and me. Every time he moved, every time he laughed, it felt like a jolt of electricity. I couldn't help but notice the way his clothes fit him, the powerful lines of his body. There was a raw, masculine energy about him that was completely different from Harry. I'd catch glimpses of him when he wasn't aware, the way his shorts outlined him when he stretched or moved quickly, that dark, powerful shape. It was a forbidden image, a secret thrill that sent a shiver down my spine. I'd try to dismiss the thoughts, to push them away, but they lingered, growing stronger with each passing day. It was as if my body had a mind of its own, drawn to him like a moth to a flame. One evening, Harry had to work late, leaving George and me alone in the backyard. We were sitting by the fire pit, the embers glowing in the darkness. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, our voices hushed, our laughter soft. There was a charged silence between us, a tension that hung in the air. He leaned in, his eyes searching mine. "Amy," he whispered, his voice low and husky. I held my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew what was coming, and I didn't stop him. I couldn't. His hand brushed against mine, a light touch that sent a wave of heat through my body. I didn't pull away. Instead, I turned to him, my eyes locking with his. The world seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of us, suspended in that moment. He reached out, his fingers tracing the curve of my cheek. I closed my eyes, savoring the touch, the warmth of his skin against mine. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. "I shouldn't," he whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of desire and guilt. "I know," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. And then he kissed me. It wasn't a passionate, forceful kiss, but a soft, tender exploration. It was a kiss that spoke of longing, of unspoken desires, of a connection that had been building for weeks. The world tilted, and I was lost in the moment. It was a brief kiss, a stolen moment, but it was enough to shatter the fragile walls I had built around myself. I knew, in that moment, that I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The guilt was immediate, a sharp, piercing pain that cut through the haze of desire. I pulled away, my eyes filled with tears. I looked at George, his eyes filled with a mixture of desire and regret. "We can't," I whispered, my voice trembling. He nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "I know," he said. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our actions hanging heavy in the air. The silence was deafening, filled with unspoken words, with the knowledge that everything had changed. I knew, in that moment, that I had made a terrible mistake. I had betrayed my husband, my marriage, myself. But the damage was done. The line had been crossed, and there was no turning back. The first touch had happened, and the emotional and physical affair had begun. The kiss, that stolen moment, was a catalyst. It ignited a fire that had been smoldering beneath the surface, transforming our unspoken desires into a tangible, dangerous reality. The guilt was a constant companion, a shadow that followed me everywhere, but the pull towards George was stronger, more insistent. The next time, it wasn't a stolen kiss in the dark. It was a calculated risk, a deliberate act of betrayal. Harry was out of town for a conference, and George, knowing this, had found a way to check on the house. He arrived late in the evening, a nervous energy radiating from him. I met him at the back door, my heart pounding in my chest. The air crackled with tension as we stood in the dimly lit kitchen. He reached for me, his hands tracing the lines of my body, his touch sending shivers down my spine. The kiss was deep, urgent, a desperate attempt to bridge the gap between our desires and our guilt. We moved to the bedroom, the silence broken only by our ragged breaths. There was an urgency in his touch, a raw passion that I had never experienced with Harry. George's size was a prominent factor, a physical presence that filled the space between us, making every touch feel more intense, more forbidden. His presence was overwhelming, a force that drew me in, making it impossible to resist. The act itself was a blur, a whirlwind of emotions and sensations. There was a sense of desperation, a need to lose ourselves in the moment, to escape the reality of our betrayal. There was a feeling of being filled, a deep, primal connection that transcended the physical. The pleasure was intense, almost overwhelming, a forbidden fruit that tasted both sweet and bitter. Afterwards, we lay in the darkness, the silence heavy with unspoken words. The guilt was a suffocating weight, a reminder of the damage we had inflicted. But there was also a sense of release, a temporary escape from the constraints of our lives. We became masters of deception, weaving a web of lies to conceal our affair. Stolen moments in empty houses, whispered conversations in crowded rooms, coded messages and deleted texts. We were living a double life, constantly looking over our shoulders, afraid of being caught. George's visits became more frequent, more calculated. He'd find excuses to be at our house when Harry was away, or he'd suggest helping, with errands that conveniently took us to secluded locations. Each encounter was a dangerous game, a thrill that came with the risk of exposure. The physical aspect of our affair was intense, a raw, primal connection that I had never experienced before. George's large frame, his powerful presence, made every encounter feel charged with a forbidden energy. His endowment was a constant source of fascination, a physical manifestation of his power and masculinity. It was a stark contrast to Harry, a reminder of the passion that was missing from my marriage. Each touch, each embrace, was a reminder of the line we had crossed, the boundary we had shattered. The sneaking in and out became a routine, a dangerous dance that we performed with practiced precision. We'd coordinate our schedules, create alibis, and communicate in code. It was a constant game of cat and mouse, a thrill that came with the fear of being caught. I'd find myself lying to Harry, making excuses to go out, to be alone. I'd become a master of deception, weaving a web of lies to conceal my affair. The guilt was a constant ache, a gnawing reminder of my betrayal. But the pull towards George was stronger, a magnetic force that I couldn't resist. The emotional toll was immense. I was constantly on edge, afraid of being discovered, afraid of losing everything. I'd have nightmares, waking up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. The guilt was a suffocating weight, a constant reminder of my betrayal. I started to withdraw from Harry, to avoid his touch, his gaze. I felt like a fraud, living a lie, betraying the man I loved. I'd look at him, his eyes filled with trust and love, and I'd feel a wave of nausea wash over me. The more I lied, the more I deceived, the deeper I sank into the abyss of infidelity. I was trapped in a cycle of self-destruction, and I didn't know how to escape. The affair was consuming me, eroding my soul, and leaving me a shell of my former self. George's presence became a constant distraction, a phantom limb that I couldn't ignore. Every interaction, every conversation was charged with unspoken desires, with the knowledge of our shared secret. I was living a double life, a life of lies and deceit, and I was slowly losing myself in the process. The thrill of the forbidden was intoxicating, but the consequences were inevitable. I was playing with fire, and I knew I was going to get burned. The question was, how badly? And how many others would I take down with me? The secret, the hidden desire, and the act itself was now a part of my life. The facade couldn't hold forever. The tension in our house grew thick, a suffocating silence that hung heavy in the air. Harry, though seemingly oblivious, sensed a shift, a distance that had crept into our relationship. He started asking questions, subtle at first, then more direct. I deflected, lied, and dodged, but the cracks were beginning to show. One evening, I left my phone unattended, a careless mistake that would unravel everything. Harry picked it up, a text message flashing across the screen. "Can't wait to see you later." It was from George. The confrontation was swift and brutal. The trust, the years of shared history, shattered in an instant. The pain in Harry's eyes was a physical blow, a searing reminder of my betrayal. He didn't yell, he didn't scream. He simply looked at me, his eyes filled with a profound sadness that cut deeper than any anger. George, when confronted, was a mixture of denial and defensiveness. He attempted to justify his actions, to minimize his role in the affair. But the damage was done. The bond between him and Harry, a friendship that had spanned a lifetime, was irrevocably broken. The aftermath was a whirlwind of emotions: shock, disbelief, regret, and a profound sense of loss. Harry moved out, the silence in our house now a deafening reminder of my solitude. The house, once a symbol of our shared life, now felt like a prison, a constant reminder of my mistakes. The consequences were devastating. My marriage was over, my reputation tarnished, and the trust of those I loved was shattered. The guilt was a heavy burden, a weight that I carried with me every day. I replayed the events in my mind, searching for a different outcome, a way to undo the damage I had caused. Looking back, I see the folly of my actions. The fleeting moments of pleasure, the stolen encounters, were nothing compared to the devastation I had wrought. I had traded a lifetime of happiness for a momentary thrill, a selfish act that had destroyed everything I held dear. The journey of self-reflection was long and painful. I had to confront the darkness within myself, the insecurities and desires that had led me astray. I had to acknowledge my responsibility for my actions, to accept the consequences of my choices. I learned that infidelity is not just a physical act, it's a betrayal of trust, a violation of the deepest bond between two people. It's a destructive force that leaves a trail of wreckage in its wake. I learned the importance of communication and honesty in relationships. The lack of open and honest dialogue had created a void in my marriage, a space that was filled with resentment and unspoken desires. I realized that true intimacy requires vulnerability, a willingness to share your deepest fears and insecurities. I learned that seeking validation outside of a relationship is a dangerous game. It's a temporary fix, a fleeting moment of gratification that ultimately leads to emptiness and regret. Healing is a slow and arduous process. It requires time, patience, and a willingness to confront the pain. It's about learning from your mistakes, accepting responsibility, and rebuilding trust, if that's even possible. Infidelity isn't a mistake, it's a choice. A choice that comes with devastating consequences. If you are struggling with thoughts of infidelity, or if you are dealing with the aftermath of an affair, please know that you are not alone. If you found this story relatable or insightful, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Your support helps us create more content like this.